Yes. This is Mark and here we have uh, one of the old Making Magic articles from magic.wizards.com. As you can see, this is from April 2009, and this was something that Mark Rosewater, hereafter to be referred to as MaRo, because, well, it's a long story, but apparently it's some internal abbreviation they used for his name that somehow managed to make its way onto a card as the name. Yeah. Anyway, so this is something that he wrote to entertain people in preparation for the release of this card back, when it was a new card. And this article isn't directly about Nicol Bolas at all. I mean, it's indirectly about Nicol Bolas, but it discusses the concept of writing characters without focusing on a specific character. And in order to do that, he throws in all sorts of examples. And it's something that after reading it, and I don't even remember why I read this the first time, I don't normally read the Making Magic things. Anyway, but one of the things here is that it's kind of sort of like a checklist with 5 different things to ask yourself when writing a character. This is obviously very specific to writing a big bad guy, the way he phrases it. And since he's talking about a Magic the Gathering card, he gets very in-depth into the whole nuts and bolts of game design for Magic the Gathering cards. But the actual story writing side of things, and that is apparently something that MaRo does quite a lot, is the story writing and lore building side of Magic the Gathering, and less the actual nuts and bolts of it, although he apparently does quite a lot of that too. So, anyways, stories have heroes and villains, and the conflict in this story is a key part of it. So, how do you go about that as a writer? Or, to be honest, if you're doing this for a player character, it's something that the player would want to keep in mind when playing the character, I suppose. Like here, the first one. The villain's goals should directly conflict with the hero's. In other words, they can't both get everything they want. Like, villain wants to burn the town down. You can't, let the villain burn the town down and then have the heroes sit around in the tavern drinking ale later in the same day, because the villain burned the tavern down. Simple example. The exact nuances of this are obviously going to depend on the story. Because who's the villain? What is the villain? What is the specifics of the villain's goals? It's something that varies greatly depending on what the story is, who the villain is. And in this case, you see a guy who is an archdemon, and you kind of look at him with pity because he's obviously gotten his ass kicked really, really hard. By who? Well, probably Nicol Bolas, honestly. Yeah, this was from the Grixis Shard of Alara, and that's the one that Nicol Bolas ripped apart. Anyway, but yeah, it's like the hero has to fight the villain because the villain will do something the hero doesn't want if the hero doesn't stop them. Okay. He gives this whole like Wicked Witch of the West analogy, which is kind of interesting because of the fact that, as he points out, the method Dorothy used to return home was to steal the slippers of the Wicked Witch, who, isn't going to willingly hand them over. And also, there's the fact that Dorothy doesn't actually know that's what she needs specifically. She just goes off, kills the Wicked Witch, and then afterwards, so someone tells her that the ruby slippers will take her home. Anyway, though. So, he goes into the details of card design using the cut person. But, we can skip over that. The villain should have some connection to the hero. Now, obviously this picture is Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker, which, let's face it, that's a very, very specific connection that is not going to apply to most stories. Like, one of his later examples is Superman and Lex Luthor, who, what is their connection to each other? Well, their connection to each other is that they've fought each other repeatedly. As a hero, the fact that the villain has done something that you need to deal with is a connection to them. And as a villain, having the hero thwart one of your plans, that would also represent a sort of connection to them. It doesn't need to be an intensely personal connection. It can be a very generic, mundane connection. But there should be a connection of some sort because of the fact that why are the hero and the villain interacting at all? In the story, they are, well, connected to each other. How is that defined? Because if they weren't connected to each other, they wouldn't be interacting. Anyways. So, oh hey, look, it's Superman and Lex Luthor. This is something that is kind of nebulous. Because the villain and the hero, while they have opposing goals and motives, aren't necessarily going to directly oppose each other. It might be something more subtle and nuanced. Like, for example, what do Lex Luthor and Superman have in common? Well, they actually both want to make Metropolis a better place. Nicer, more technologically savvy. It's just that Luthor's idea of doing this is to have everyone work for him. Superman doesn't agree with that idea because, quite frankly, having Lex Luthor ruling the world would probably be akin to a corrupt corporate bureaucracy worldwide, and Luthor is not exactly a trustworthy individual in such regards. Which, again, this is what I was saying about hero fights for freedom, blah, blah, blah. And he uses the example of Kamal and Jessica because they started out as warriors fighting kind of sort of for a similar goal. And then they end up with different goals. Jessica becomes this undead monster, and Kamal becomes someone who is less violent than he used to be. Which, things change. I guess is a simpler way to put that. That, it's a complicated story. But it's like, they change, but they change in a way that actually makes them more different. Anyway, Now, this is one that is kind of interesting because if the villain isn't a threat to the hero, then what's the point of the story? I mean, you're not going to write a TTRPG module where you start off with the heroes killing the bad guy and then walking off to loot his castle without any real conflict, are you? And, this is the reason why he used Ming the Merciless as an example, is because the fact that in a one-on-one fist fight, Flash is actually more than capable of beating Ming. It wouldn't actually even be all that hard, assuming it's actually a one-on-one fist fight. Ming the Merciless has a variety of weapons hidden in his clothing. You will probably get shot to death if you try to challenge him to a fist fight, because that's not what Ming does. Ming is an evil overlord who has armies to deal with people like you. Dale Arden, yeah, he doesn't even care about someone like this. It's like, you go do the thing I told you to do. Get away from me. Flash, is actually someone who he has to fight to force to do his bidding. And that's where the story comes in. Obviously, Flash needs a lot of help to deal with Ming the Merciless because Ming has armies, like I mentioned. And that, in this particular case, is the reason why Ming is more powerful than the hero. Or I guess the manner in which Ming is more powerful. Because, as I mentioned earlier, Ming can't beat Flash in a fist fight. Just couldn't do it. Because Flash is physically more adept in such matters. But Ming shooting you from across the room, yeah, that'll totally happen. If Ming gets the opportunity to do that. But this is the whole thing with like big bad guys, is that you don't start the story with killing the big bad guy. If for a proper campaign, you need a setup where the heroes have to kind of like chip away at things over time, and it's not necessarily quick or easy. And that's the point. It needs to not be quick or easy, because if it's quick and easy, then the story's over and it's time to go do something else. And, you know, oh, his example here is that to do this for the actual printed cards, they just give the bad guy higher stats than the good guy, which, okay, that certainly is a way to make so something seem more powerful up front. Like I said, he was actually kind of sort of writing about Nicol Bolas without actually talking about Nicol Bolas. Anyway, though, I think that's enough of that. So, but the basic gist of this whole thing, though, is that these are all things that you can. They're not necessarily the only things to think about when designing characters, but it's a list of things that is useful to keep in mind. Because, how is the villain a threat? What abilities does the hero have to bring to the table that make the hero able to oppose the villain? Because let's face it, the flip side of having a villain who's too weak and not a threat to the hero is a hero who's unable to fight the villain. Because, like I mentioned before, Dale Arden trying to fight Ming the Merciless would not work as well as having Flash do it, because Flash is actually able to fight him, and Dale is less able to do so. Anyways, so it's like one of the things that I mentioned several times is that, to me, the old good, evil, chaotic, lawful thing for characters, whereas it's like you have lawful evil character, chaotic good character. I'm not actually 100% sure chaotic is actually the right for Superman. I'm thinking more like neutral, because he certainly spends a lot of time working with organizations and carefully thought out stuff. It's just that he's of the opinion that laws should benefit the people, not solely exist to force people to do the will of whoever created the laws. But again, that's about character design. Oh well. Just one of those things. It's like, is it necessarily the be-all, end-all? No. But it's interesting food for thought. Even if it's not something that's necessarily directly related to the TTRPGs, it's close enough. And MaRo, whether you like him or not, he has done a lot of stuff over the years. Like, seriously, apparently he still has a job writing, making magic stuff, because these are new. I think this is like the two most recent ones he did. Alright, well, I'll call it there then. See you guys later.